Welcome in, race fans, to this edition of Through the Gears, presented by Front Stretch. I'm your host, Tino, and I couldn't be more excited to get back into the NASCAR betting, racing, and winning action for this weekend's race at Iowa? Yes, Iowa Speedway. Going to be very interesting going there for the first time in the Cup cars, and how can we bet on that? Well, I'll be breaking it down for you in this episode, and I'll also be joined by none other than Wyatt Watson from Front Stretch. He's coming up back onto the show, and I couldn't be more excited to have him on again, talk to him a little bit about what he's thinking and about how we can even figure out who to bet on and how to perform well at this racetrack, and which drivers are going to do the same in this one. Got to give a special shout out to my man Kyle B8. He commented on the last video. I appreciate that, Kyle B8. And he said MTJ was a solid pick, in which we did have MTJ. He qualified back in the pack, but ultimately worked his way up towards the front until he was supposed to finish second and ran out of gas, and then ultimately ended up ruining his entire day. And another driver that had his day ruined was Kyle Busch. I mean, when is Kyle going to ever get away from the bad luck this season? We'll break that down in this episode as well. Gotta give a shout out to Wagging It and Shagging It, who said solid thoughts and solid gold jacket. Appreciate that. And I'm excited to get into this episode. So without further ado, let's go through the gears. And now joining us as we go through the gears is the man, the myth, the legend, Wyatt Watson. Thanks for joining us, Wyatt. And I mean, how have you been? It's been a little bit since you've been on the program. How's everything going for you there? And I appreciate everything you've been doing for Front Stretch. It's been great to see all the content. So how's it going?
It's been going great, man. I've been just chilling since Texas. I did get to go to the Indianapolis 500 on my own time, and the second time going to that was impressive. I got to go to a couple races in the Indiana area while I was out there. I actually got to meet Ryan Newman and Tony Stewart at the Little 500, for those who know about that event. That was a crazy event. Former NASCAR driver Dakota Armstrong losing to his cousin Caleb Armstrong. That was a wild event. Other than that, my vets out there didn't do too well for Indy 500. I know Newgarden did well for you there, but other than that, I've been in Texas, been analyzing the sport, just been doing 1 week at a time, working my ass off. So I've been having a great time. Thank you for having me again. First time since Texas. It's been a while since I've seen you, buddy.
Hell yeah, brother. It's awesome to have you back on. And, like you said, Newgarden did do well for me there, but it's been a little bit since then. We're trying to stay hot in different ways that we can. We're trying to get back to victory lane. And speaking of that, Sonoma was last weekend. Unfortunately, I didn't hit on the outright winner there. Tell us a little bit if you did and some of your plays that happened at Sonoma, which was a weird race, I felt like.
Being in Texas, I can't make any bets, but I did look at the odds, at least for outright winner, before that race, and I actually would have probably pulled on Kyle Larson's plus 400. Maybe not too much, maybe 1.5 unit type bet for me, just to get a little cash. That would have pulled. But another one I was looking at, I would have looked at if I was more serious about it, was a top 3 or a top 5 finish for McDowell or Buescher, because they had those hell of good runs back in 2022. McDowell's been really good here in the next gen car. Buescher has been very consistent on road courses. Their numbers were like astronomical. I checked NASCAR, the NASCAR app. It was 25-1, at least for the win for McDowell, and it was 28-1 for Buescher's win. So you're probably looking at like a +6 to +800 play just for a top 3. That would have been a steal to try to get to get those to hit, and they did, obviously. I mean, it was McDowell second, crazily enough, Chris Buescher third. Truex was tempting, but just with the repave and how he didn't practice, I wouldn't have pulled on it, but that would have been gut wrenching if anyone did. I feel bad for all you Truex bettors out there for Sonoma, but what a crazy.
That was me. I was the Truex guy.
God bless you, dude. But that was the craziest Sonoma race I've seen, like, since the Car Tomorrow days. I I can't think of a Sonoma race that was that crazy. Like the whole weekend too, and that Xfinity race, goodness gracious! But what a weekend for Sonoma betting for all you guys out there.
It was very weird, to put it. Like, if I had to pick one word, it would be weird, right? We see 7 cautions within the first stage, right? Or was that first
The
2
first two
stages?
stages, yeah.
Insane, and that was wild to me. And I actually had my cousins came over to watch the race with me, new NASCAR fans here, and because they were pulled in by a gateway and everything that happened there, I was like, okay, come back. They come back, they're hype, and honestly, I was a little like just confused as to what was going on. I was trying to break everything down to them about what everything that was happening. Oh yeah, road course, we'll see a lot of racing action, and like we talked about, first 2 stages, 7 cautions, and then okay, so it's going to be a wreck fest, or at least a caution fest throughout the remainder of the race. No, then the next stage only has one. It was a stage break, I believe, or maybe there was one caution in between. We finished with 8. The record was 9, and that was insane to see too, because the strategy is what made all of the bets hit or not hit there. With Truex specifically, runs out of gas at the very last lap, but Larson earned that victory, like you mentioned. I was very surprised to see the lead he had. Well, and another thing too was Tyler Reddick. Tyler Reddick, he doesn't, get into the corner too hot there and burn his tires off. It's probably him versus Kyle Larson in the end, and he kind of ruined his day there. Do you think if it was a battle between those two, would Larson still have won that race?
I think Larson would have still won. I mean, Larson was catching him before the end of stage 1, I believe, and he just had the most dominant car. He just cut through the field. He just was like a ninja out there. Young Money just took care of business and just got all the way to the front, like no questions. I feel like Truex could have held him off, but of course it would have been just like what Watkins Glen 2015 when Logano beat him when he ran out of fuel, something like that. One of those years, but it would have been just heartbreak all over again for these Truex guys. I mean, he still has really good points as long as there's not a lot of winners, obviously. But in terms of like from a betting perspective, I would have just kept with Larson. I had faith in him to get up there to the front, or just for his strategy to play out. Him and Cliff Daniels on top of the box there. It's hard to bet against Larson at from any track, honestly. But when he's that fast at Sonoma, and remember, I think it was last year, he was the dominant car, but then the tire took him out when the tire came off and ruined his race. And I don't think there was cautions, and there's no cautions in 2023, so that derailed this whole race. So it was just a bounce back race for Larson from Sonoma. I would have not wavered from him though.
Yeah, that's a good perspective to have too, and especially the whole waiver talk and everything like that. He's gonna come back
waiver out, right?
Yeah, like we should have seen that one coming, or at least I should have. And then, but I will say, from a props perspective, on some of the plays that I gave out, we did hit on Ross Chastain top 5. We had Michael McDowell top 5 as well. Yeah, barely. Ross was barely.
Dude, he
got in there. Yeah. So I was happy about that. It was last lap. It came down to the last lap for that one to hit. So we got Ross top 5, McDowell top 5, Buescher top 10 was at plus money heading into the race because he qualified like 28th as well. So
that's what I'm saying.
So the props did sort of help out the overall outright winner loss there from my end. So that was good to see that we were in the right direction, but not officially back in victory lane just yet. And that's where we're trying to be at Iowa. Wyatt, when I say Iowa, I mean, what are you even thinking about? It's got the asterisks over here on the board because it is just insane. Like what is going on? We're racing cup cars at Iowa. We have no data to use, or do we? Break it down for us here. What are you thinking about when we're going back to Iowa, or going to Iowa for the first time in the cup cars?
The first thing I think about is corn. But the most important thing I'm thinking about when like prepping for Iowa, first of all, it's like I view it as kind of a bigger Richmond, honestly. So that's where my first thoughts go to, is to look at the Richmond numbers, because it's semi similar to Richmond. But the second curveball in this equation is they partially repaved the track. So I mean, here's the only things we can draw back on. Number
Partially,
one,
too. Partially.
the partially.
Right.
It's not even fully repaved. It's a half-ass
Explain
repave.
that, because I know some people who watch the show that may not like know what the track's going to look like heading into this weekend. Break that down a little bit further about the partially, because I've seen it and it's insane.
It looks like a Frankenstein track. I don't know why they did it. It's I don't even know how to break it down. I've never seen something like this at any NASCAR track before. I've been watching since what, 2007. I don't know. Like it's just a half work. They should have just repaved the whole track if they want to do that. So I think the closest comparison is like when they put like PJ1 on the track at some of these places, and it's more grip. It's just gonna be more grip on the repaved asphalt. So that's the closest comparison to that. And I don't know how to. There's no really prep for that, but the prep that you can do is that number one, three drivers did a tire test, and it's Christopher Bell, it's Kyle Larson, and it's Brad Keselowski. And Bell is about plus 400 at most places. Kyle Larson's a plus 650 on a boosted odds on Caesars. That's a really good number. And then there's Brad Keselowski. It's a plus 1200 universally as well. But those three have a significant advantage just because we've seen this year on like North Wilkesboro, on Sonoma, that drivers that have tire tested at these tracks have a significant advantage over the field. And it showed at North Wilkesboro mainly because Logano tire tested and put 800 laps or so on that facility, and then got pole and never relinquished it. Just how the next gen and short tracks are.
Ty Gibbs at North Wilkesboro too, right?
Yeah,
he tested
the All-Star Open. Yeah, the All-Star Open. I mean, it was just complete utter domination. So you have to look at those drivers that have done the tire test. That's the biggest tell. The second tell is just Joey Logano in general, the king of repaves. You're telling me I'm not going to bet Joey Logano when the track's been repaved? I mean, nobody's been on Iowa in a cup car, and more than like a third of the field hasn't driven on this in at least 4 years, or even at all. A third of the drivers in the field have only raced on it at all. So it's hard to tell just from a historical standpoint. That's why my third point is, again, going back to Richmond. I just kind of draw the numbers from Richmond just because that's the closest we can get in terms of any track layout. That's the closest we can get to about 0.88 mile, just under a mile for Iowa.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too in mentioning Joey Logano, right? So you mentioned he's the king of repaves, but I also feel like he's the king of just new tracks. The Clash in 2022, he won that. Gateway, the first race, or the one that they had back there, he won that. So, and then North Wilkesboro, sure, it wasn't the first year, but the second year, he wins that. Joey Logano, to me, when we get to a new racetrack, has just performed. He's just or won. So to me, and with that, and then having the comparison to Richmond, like you've mentioned, and I think that's a huge smart play from your end in the prep work, because Joey Logano finished second at Richmond this season. So, and it's one of his better tracks. We could go on and on about Logano, and I think for good reason. I think if there is another driver in the Ford camp, aside from Brad Keselowski, who, like you mentioned, has the reps from the tire test, and I'll repeat it again, because the testing to me is huge, because that trend has considerably paid off. I mean, Martin Truex Jr. was one of the guys that tested at Sonoma when they had a tire test there. So was Ross Chastain. Truex looked like he was in position to win. Chastain, a top 5 car most of the day, we'll say. I mean,
he could have competed for the win too with his strategy. Honestly, if it worked out better, Ross was about it was him and Reddick were the only 3 drivers that could compete at Sonoma like that. And you could throw in Truex at the end with a long run though. And that's a kind of an asterisk. The long run is where Truex like dominates Sonoma. But continue though. Yeah.
No. I mean, no, I'm glad you threw that in there because that it
Yeah.
just goes to show the trend we're seeing from these tire tests. And I think that's it. Like, it's an important thing to note when we are betting on or picking these drivers to win outright, or at least be in a position to do so this weekend at Iowa. Why? Anything else you got from a prep standpoint? I will say before we do dive into that, shout out to wintherace.info because I got this crazy sheet from all of the past drivers' experience at Iowa. I'll read it off to you guys tuning in here just a little bit. You can follow them at wintherace.info or check out their website as well, as they got all of the best strategies, analytics, and everything you need to know heading into the race weekends. Kyle Busch right now, he's on the top of the board, but just because he's on the top of the board doesn't necessarily mean he'll be performing there this weekend. He has 2 races there with an average finish of 1.5. Brad Keselowski is one of the drivers with the most, actually in the Cup Series, he will be the driver with the most experience at Iowa, which is huge because 7 races he has run there. So whether that's between Xfinity, the Truck Series, either one, combined 7 races, Brad has won there, an average finish of 3rd, a 43% win percentage. And like we mentioned, he tested there. And RFK has just been fast recently. I'll mention a couple more guys. Christopher Bell has a lot of experience there. Noah Gragson, William Byron, and Ryan Blaney. Bell and Blaney, I got my eyes on in this one. They both have 5 races run at Iowa. And yeah, sure, we mentioned the repave, and, obviously Xfinity cars are not even comparable to the Cup cars, especially in this next gen era. But I still feel like the reps and experience at this track will play into their favor here. Wyatt, what do you think about any of that? Do you think we can sort of pick up on any of those stats?
You can certainly pick up on it just from it. You have to also like count for which drivers are hot right now. Like Kyle Busch right now, sure, you could pick up his plus 2,500 on DraftKings right now, but is that money well spent with how he's been running? No, I don't. He just hasn't competed for wins. Keselowski's competed for wins at just varying tracks. He even got a top 15 at Sonoma. You know how impressive that is with how bad he's ran at road courses. I mean, that's also right strategy, but Keselowski running 13th at Sonoma is a freaking W, if you ask me. So when you see he has 7 races, and I looked up his stats on racing reference, he has 3 wins there. It was awesome coming in 2014. His last start coming in 2016. You have to take that into account because he has plenty. He has the most starts at Iowa. So his plus 1,200 number, I like way better than a plus 20, like risking a plus 25 on a Kyle Busch. So yeah, that like experience plays a heavy factor. I mean, Christopher Bell with his average finish and being the most recent guy is what's pulling his plus 400 going into the weekend. And I would look at his number after qualifying if he doesn't do well in qualifying, but he is no doubt he's one of the best qualifiers in the series right now. So good luck with that. That number's probably only going to shrink maybe or it might just stay, honestly. There's no way it goes to like plus 3. It could go to plus 300 like floor level, but it's tough to pull that number just because of how low it is. Whereas Keselowski plus 1,200, there's value there, and I'll take the value.
100%. I think that's a great point too. And that's a great segue too with the odds breakdown now. Let's analyze some of that a little bit further. Christopher Bell, let's stick on him just for a couple more seconds here because I think that's a great point that you mentioned. If he goes out and wins the pole, as he's done multiple times this season and last season, like he's one of the best qualifiers, like you said. And recently, or at least in the past, what I had noticed with him is he'd qualify on the pole and go backwards. He wouldn't stay there and go forwards. He would just kind of just run back, maybe be lucky with the top 10 finish, top 5, but that's what I was seeing out of Christopher Bell and that 20 team earlier this season. But they've kind of broken that slump that they were on. After they got the win in the Coke 600, yeah, it was rained out, but it's still going to help their mojo, I feel like. And we're only a couple of races removed from that. But he would have won a WWT Raceway had it not been for an engine issue, right? So
that's correct.
This plus 80 number right now, if he goes out and wins the pole, I wouldn't expect anything less than plus 300, like you mentioned there. Now, for other drivers, though, like Kyle Larson, and to that point, I'll stick to that point with Christopher Bell. Why not wait? Like, why not wait until after practice and qualifying, just to be sure if that's something that you guys are interested in? I mean, to me, I know Bell is a driver I'm betting on this weekend to win outright. So maybe if you're that confident in him like I am, maybe get him earlier. But at the same time, if he slips up in practice and qualifying, whatever the case may be, then maybe you'll get him for better odds if he does not qualify inside the top 3 or 5 there. Is there any other drivers on the board, and you alluded to them a little bit there, Wyatt, that you see that could present value early on midweek, and then could go down after practice and qualifying?
First off, I completely agree with your Bell assessment. I would also completely wait for qualifying for him and to see his number either grow or stay about the same. There's no it only gets better with Bell if he qualifies below the top 10, and if he does qualify pole, then that's also a good omen, because a lot of these other drivers' numbers are going to fluctuate as well, depending on where they qualify, and that's where those numbers truly will move seismically. Otherwise, Kyle Larson's number I mentioned, it was plus 650 right now. Let me say that again. Plus 650 for Kyle Larson in any race is a steal. I don't care where we're going. So him at plus 650 on Caesars, it is a boosted odds for him to go back to back. I would take that number right now, midweek, because after qualifying, that's probably not going to be offered, and it'll probably at most be a 650 if he qualifies in the back or has like a disqualification or something like that. I don't see 650 at all any other day of the week. So take it now. Keselowski's plus 1200 now is decent, but the one I really like, and it's Joey Logano again, plus 1100 on Bet Rivers. Plus 1100 on Bet Rivers at a newly repaved track, like we said. That is extreme value. I like that. William Byron also, we're going to talk more about him in another segment for me, but his number's plus 1200, and he's a former winner at Iowa, and he's ran real well there. So I would take that number as well. Those are the outright numbers I would take.
I like that. I like that a lot. And a couple of drivers that stuck out to me as well. Ross Chastain, one of them, plus 2,800. Just someone to consider. Maybe not comfortable betting on him before practice, and qualifying like we're alluding to here. But that number specifically for Ross Chastain, I feel like that's got to go down regardless. I don't see him qualifying or practicing in a position that's making that 28-1 go up. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that. Yeah.
I feel like he's going to go like
there.
I feel like he's only like his floor is like a top 15 qualifying, like just barely missing out on the fast 10. So yeah, 28 is a great number for him. Like I like Chris, but like I'm looking at it. Oh, this one's really good. Chase Elliott's also a plus 1800 on DraftKings.
Oh, wow.
That's the best number on any of the sports books that I've looked at. That is an absolute, and he's ran really. He's never won here in the Xfinity Series, but he's ran decent. He has a runner-up finish, so like his top 3 prop is also a plus 500, like something like that. If you want to bet on him,
the fact that he has experience at this track, maybe he hasn't won or anything like that, like some of the other guys have, but for him, that just the long laps at this racetrack at all, I think is going like. I think we will see a big difference. Hey, maybe I'm wrong, but even with the repave, even with the Cup cars, I think there will be a difference between the drivers that have experience at Iowa and the drivers that don't in this one.
I think Chase Elliott got like a top 5 in the All-Star race too, and he drove up to that too. Remember? So that's another point to be proven there, and that's well said there, Tino.
Thank you. Well, I want to say some winners pretty well as well. So, in terms of the outright winners, let's get into that segment here, and I think we can agree on 3 drivers right off the bat, and probably don't even need much more discussion. First one, the favorite, Christopher Bell. Whether you bet on him now or after practice and qualifying, which would be the safe idea in terms of seeing his value get a little bit higher or sort of stay the same, like we mentioned, I do think you got to bet on Christopher Bell in this one, just because of how hot that team has been becoming after getting their win, their second win, that is, at, the season at the Coke 600, and Bell's experience at this track. Also, then Kyle Larson, you alluded to it greatly, or broke it down for us greatly, rather. Plus 650 for that boost there is huge. And I think that is something that's really important to note, like you've mentioned as well. That's as high as a value for Kyle Larson. Yeah, sure. We're seeing Ross Chastain 28-1, Elliott 18-1, sure. But for Kyle, keep in mind, guys, it's Kyle Larson, the driver that can go to any track and win, and is the favorite every week, it seems like, this season. That's why that number at plus 650 is value for a driver of his caliber. So Bell, Larson, and honestly, Brad Keselowski's another one based off his history there and the testing, factor that we mentioned. Those are three drivers that I'll be betting on outright winners on. Brad, maybe a little bit less than the other two, or definitely a little bit less, but Wyatt, is there anyone else that can compete with those top three?
I got in my notes, like I said earlier, Joey Logano plus 1100 on Bet Rivers. You just can't ignore that number now because he is a threat to get the pole, and he will go into the triple digits easy. Like I'd put the house on him getting a really good qualifying and that lowering significantly. So plus 11 for Logano, and you don't have to take the number now, but don't forget about Denny Hamlin. He's at a plus 700 right now on DraftKings. Just check that. But Denny Hamlin at plus 700 is kind of sneaky. Remember, he won at Richmond, and this is me going back to my Richmond conversation. He did well. I mean, he did get a little bit of a assist there by, I'll call it NASCAR and Fox. Thank God that's over, by the way. But credit to that happening to where Hamlin got the W there, but he won there, and and he's won at Richmond multiple times, and he's ran well there consistently. So even though we don't have any data about Denny Hamlin racing at Iowa, that I think it's not on the chart because he was full-time Cup by then. Yeah. I would never count out Denny Hamlin at a track like this, and a plus 700 number could sway lower if we see Bell do really well. And it depends on, I want to see practice mainly for Hamlin, but that's why his number is probably like 700. And I would take it. I'd risk for it. Again, Larson, we've mentioned multiple times, plus 650. That's on Caesars again, boosted. Take that number right now, or you're missing out. And then William Byron's my legit pick again. I'd take him plus 1200 on Bet Rivers and Caesars. Those are his number. It's plus 11 right now on DraftKings, but I like the plus 12 number for him for a track he's won at and has had success at. So those are my four I'm looking at. Bell is an honorable mention because you have to see what's going on with him this weekend, and if he does get pole, then good for everyone else. If he doesn't get pole, then he's entered the chat.
Yeah, no, definitely agree there. One driver that I want to mention to you to see what you think about him, and this is specifically because of the Richmond comparison, right? So Denny Hamlin won at Richmond, but who should have won there? None other than Martin Truex Jr. He is 10-1 to win this weekend. Now, at least I got to give my 2 cents. It's probably I've been on the MTJ train, and it's been a wild ride because he's been in position to win for multiple weeks. At least Kansas, he was there. Sonoma, he was there. He looked to have a fast car at the Coke 600. I mean, he's dominated there before. It didn't really pan out. Dover, he was there.
Richmond, he was there. He should have won Richmond.
Exactly my point. So, because of that, should we think about him for this one, or because of his bad luck this season, just want him to prove it to us first?
No, you absolutely think about Truex. I mean, he's in my notes for a specific reason. again, this is a very Richmond-esque track, and he should have won Richmond. And he's been so close, honestly. Like, I mean, what his other numbers right now too? A top 3 is a plus 285. A top 5 is a plus 130. His props are also very. I actually have down my notes here too. Truex top 3 is also boosted on Caesars for plus 340. That's a great number. I'm taking that prop. Now for him outright winning, it's that luck factor that just comes into racing sometimes and just bites you in the butt. Like I love to take Truex at a plus 1,000. What's keeping me from going full send on it is just that luck factor. It's like I don't want to be strung into that bad luck train, and I see everything else. It's like Byron has a win here in Xfinity. He's strong here. Logano's the king of the repave. Keselowski, Larson, and Bell have tire tested on this track. There's a lot of just extraneous factors that have been showing their head this season that keeps me from pulling the trigger on Truex. Now, granted, if we go through practice and qualifying and his number changes, or he has a fast practice time, but then he has a bad qualifying, then sure, like I could probably throw I mean, I'm hoping the prop number goes up at that point. But you could also, but for your Truex bettors, you could totally take Truex again. Just be wary. There's just too much going on to where I'm confident in taking Truex right now.
I completely agree with that. I'm at the point now, and I think it's not exactly the same to Kyle Busch, because Kyle, I feel like Truex has been capable of winning races and Busch just hasn't been. But in terms of the value, like people look at Kyle Busch in sort of the same vein where it's like, oh, he's 25-1, he's Kyle Busch, like that's great value. Well, no, it's not necessarily. And when we look at like how he's been racing and the bad luck and the dark cloud that's been following him, like I said, I don't think that dark cloud is as big, you know, for Truex as it is for Kyle Busch, but it's still something to consider, especially in racing. I think that's a huge point that you mentioned, is momentum plays a big factor. And like we talked about it for the favorites and Bell and Larson, Denny too. Like, you know, he finished last week, but if anything, that is why I could see him winning this week, because he's just one of those drivers where he'll be able to flip the switch. He'll be able to run with a narrative and capitalize on that. So speaking of, you know, drivers with higher value in that sense, before we move on to some of our prop bets there, I do want to talk about any potential underdogs or guys that may have more value to win this one outright. And you know, this doesn't necessarily mean that we will be betting on them, because I do think the guys that we mentioned who are the favorites are favorited for a reason, right? Like that is something that I definitely consider, especially after what happened last weekend at Sonoma with Kyle Larson. But one name that stands out to me, and I mentioned him before, was Ross Chastain. Ross Chastain at 28-1. You know, we talked about, I feel like he's a decent driver when it comes to Richmond. You know, he is good at Nashville, good at Dover. Is that something that could potentially translate to Iowa? And could we see him, running well here? And is there any other guys that you see on the board now where you take a second to think, maybe he could win this one outright?
Yeah, Chastain's in that conversation for me too. It's that 2,800 number is great. And I looked at his stats Xfinity wise. With JD Motorsports in the 4, he got a top 5 here at Iowa.
Oh,
so
wow.
Yeah, that was an interesting stat. I was like, okay, that doesn't sway me too much, but like for an underdog type pick, yeah. His Richmond stats as of the last couple, it's been kind of mediocre, but he did run well here or at Richmond in 2022. It's just a matter of if they have the setup nailed down for this Iowa race and this new repave and all that. That's the biggest thing that's kind of like very iffy on that from that department. Other underdogs that I'm looking at, just off the hip here, Josh Berry, you always have to you have to look at Josh Berry when you go to a short track. I mean, or even he had like a top 3 at Darlington even. That was a zany one, but
Coke 600 too. I know it got rained out, but he was running like he'll surprise you. And I feel like if he'll surprise you at those racetracks, he'll be there even more for the short tracks. We'll continue because Josh Berry was the guy I had in my head.
Josh Berry finished second with Hendrick at Richmond. I mean, he had a top 10 with Stewart-Haas Racing at at Richmond this year and also looked pretty damn strong. He had a great car at Bristol. He is built for short tracks. I mean, I would say Ryan Preece too, but I think the 41 team that's set sail. But I mean, Barry and you might be able to squeak in a Chase Briscoe in this conversation. He's a plus 550. He's the most recent Xfinity winner at Iowa, but I mean, Stewart-Haas's Xfinity program is a little bit of an asterisk because they are way ahead of the curve compared to where they are now. But it's those kind of drivers you have to look at and be like, they could snag the win. I mean, Bowman could snag the win. Bubba Wallace could snag the win if everything works out in terms of setup. But realistically, I look at those two and it's like, man, like they have more than just, well, they could snag a win. They have like Barry has the short track down. Briscoe's a former winner here. And if luck turns around, that can come to help him if he's on the right strategy or if he just has a car that can compete. That's what it comes down to for me. But those are the two, like Chastain mainly, Barry just right behind him, and then Briscoe on a far fetch are the ones I'd look at right now for an underdog pick.
For sure. I'm glad you mentioned Josh Berry because my eyes popped open even wider than they were before when I saw him at 35-1. Now, granted, like that is, I would say, fair value and value that makes sense for a Stewart-Haas driver, a driver that doesn't have a win in the Cup Series. But why I got so excited about that from an outright winner standpoint, sure. But Josh Berry, when it comes to prop bets, could he sneak into the top 5? I mean, let's break that down right now while we're talking about him. So he's plus 450 for a top 5, plus 1,000 for a top 3. I'm checking the top 10 right
plus
now.
130, plus 130.
I'm on Josh Berry for a top 10 officially.
Easy.
Locked, but that is locked in. Josh Berry for a top 10 plus 130 at Iowa at a short track with that value. This is a driver where, yeah, sure, 35-1 to win outright. Okay, but for a top 10, you give me plus money for Josh Berry on a short track. I'm taking it. I'm taking it.
I could even take the top 5, honestly, just because of how he's performed on these tracks. Like that's just, I would be pleasantly happy to take those odds. Top 3 is pushing it just because there's just so many good competitors. But Barry's one of those guys can break through and get at least to a top 5. That's a great number for him going for the plus 450. I can guarantee you, I think ESPN Bets and FanDuel, I have to plug them here. They have really good odds for their props from there too. A top 5 for Barry is a plus 550 on that.
On
ESPN. On ESPN Bets, and I'm looking at FanDuel. That's my last one I'm going to look at. But for FanDuel on Barry, it's give me a second. Oh, that's a top 10. Plus 140 top 10 for Barry. Just for
even that,
just for information. Too. That's a little better, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll take. Hey, I mean, like I'm not one that, like, for me specifically, I stayed locked into 1 or 2 books just to make it easier for myself. But for you guys out there, if you are price shopping, which you should, like that's the smart thing to do and make more money that way. Like if you get plus 140 on one book and plus 130 on the other, I'm going with a plus 140. So that 100%. Is a great point, Wyatt, for sure. Always price shop when you can. And Josh Berry, I'm so glad that we saw that here, because that is a driver in the top 10 market that is locked in. Let's transition now into, well, do you have any more top 10s, for us? And that's if we'll stay with top 10s for now.
I'm about to say, yeah, let me get to the rest of I have a couple other props here. I got, again, I'm going to plug the Truex top 3 for a plus 340 on Caesars right now. That is to die for a prop on Truex in the top 3. And with how good he ran at Richmond, like we said. Chase Elliott, again, he is a top 5 plus 260 on FanDuel. I do like that number as well. If you're looking for more of a favorite, that's got some good value. And for long shot top 10s, and this is just based off, I love the value so much, I'm going to throw something at it. Carson Hocevar and Todd Gilliland are both a plus 800 on ESPN. And compared to like DraftKings, they're like plus 550s. Like, I'm going for those numbers regardless. And I'm actually kind of upset because I did take him on a top 10 in the Coke 600 and it did not hit. And then Gateway, he got a top 10. It's like, oh man, that would have, and I was like, it was like a plus 1,000 on that, but that's just a little story for you. But yeah, no, Carson Oatsford and Todd Gilliland. Yeah.
I'm a huge Todd Gilliland fan. I'm so Todd's resigned.
He got a top 10 last week.
Exactly. Todd is the man. He outperforms almost every week. So far this season, I've been talking. I mean, if you guys tuning in, you know that I've been talking about Todd every week because, or at least it seems that way. And I feel like other people aren't, and I feel like they should be because Todd is just, and Carson's another host bar too. Like those two drivers right now, if you're talking about overperforming in equipment, and Justin Haley too. Those are my top three.
Yeah, Justin Haley.
Overperformers, Justin Haley for sure. But 100%, I like those, especially the value, right? If we're talking about value, that's what comes to mind is those plus 800 numbers.
The only thing for Todd Gilliland too, the other plug for Todd Gilliland, he started sixth at Richmond and he ran very solidly the whole race. Like I do actually like that, like betting for Todd Gilliland to get a top 10 at a track like this, because who knows? If things go right, he can get it, and it's completely possible.
Yeah, and if we're talking about the speed that Ford has shown in the second half of this regular season now, it all started with Brad winning at Darlington, I think, because then, yeah, sure, Joey wins the All-Star race, whatever, but still, they've maintained consistent speed since then. We saw with Buescher at Sonoma as well. Even Austin Cindric wins at WWT.
Buescher at Kansas too. Buescher at Kansas is where it really. You could say Logano too at Richmond, but I think he wasn't really a real factor. Buescher at Kansas where it just set sail.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. And so now to that point, I mean, who is partnered with Team Penske right now? Well, that is front row Michael McDowell, Todd Gilliland. Hey, Michael McDowell, how about him for what? Let's see his odds for a top 10 on DraftKings specifically. We're looking at plus 380. I don't hate that number for McDowell. I feel like that's actually pretty fair for him. And I expected him to do really. I mean, he was on the pole at WWT, right? Then had an issue. Didn't even finish inside the top 10 there. If I'm remembering correctly. So that was
he just didn't perform well. He's qualified. Like him, I think Bet Rivers does a lot of pole props or not pole props, but they actually bet for the pole. He's awesome to bet for poles because he's just been knocking them out. Just at like kind of. I didn't think he was going to get pole at Worldwide Technology, but then he just lays down a lap 3/10 quicker than everybody else. It's like, all right, well, Michael McDowell's here. They're here today, and then once race day comes on the ovals, it's like, well, he give it his best shot, but no, McDowell's been great at qualifying. So like getting these numbers early for at least a top 10, that is, because he can knock out a top 10 in that car. It's great value to get right now. Yeah, because who knows 100%. If he gets the pole, and then that number goes into a minus.
Yeah. So speaking on him, sticking with the Fords, Brad Keselowski for a top 5 plus 155. I think that'll be a number. See, that number could go up because RFK has not been the fastest at qualifying. I mean, we saw it last week, and obviously different track, but Buescher qualified 28th and then ended up potentially, being in contention for the win there at the end. And I think Brad actually said that in one of his interviews as well, saying that, RFK hasn't had much speed when it comes to qualifying, but they really care about the long run speed during the race and everything like that. And we've seen it thus far this season. But my point is, with that top 5 number and prop for Brad, I do like it at plus 155 right now. It could go up in value after practicing qualifying, with them being, like he said, slower in qualifying, but having that long run speed during the race. So that's a number that I'll probably wait on, but the prop I'm definitely thinking of, with him being a driver that has tested there, like we said, and having plus money. Because just recapping the top 5 market too, Bell is minus 185, Larson minus 125, and Denny minus 105 for their top 5 specifically at DraftKings. And to me, with all like that makes sense. And I don't think any of those numbers will see plus money this entire weekend. So with Logano being at plus 110 right now, if you're watching this video, or the show rather, I would lock that one in now, because I feel like much like those top 3 that are in the minus value there, or not much value because of that, I would hop on like a Logano, Blaney, maybe even a Byron as well now, because I think they'll just continue to drop under that line when it moves forward earlier on deep into the weekend.
Oh, for sure, buddy, for sure. And I'd do the same thing with if I were to do a top 5 prop like that. Plus 140 Byron, absolutely, or plus 140 or what? Plus 155 Keselowski. Come on, man. Plus 110 Logano is going to go into minus for sure. I think when he gets pole, I think I don't see anyone else getting pole other than maybe Bell. That's about it.
100%, or maybe like a random McDowell.
Yeah, McDowell supremacy. Plug the weekly NASCAR weekly podcast there. That's crazy. That'd be crazy.
But no, I think we've kind of hit the nail on the head from all that. Like in terms of top 3 too, that's probably the one we've touched on the least. I'm not seeing anything there that I mean, maybe a Bell if you feel really confident about them, but at plus 110 for a top 3, to me, I don't touch top 3s that much, even because of how many things have to go right for them to be in that position. I'd rather take a top 5 guy where you have that ability, for more room for error, obviously, because of it being 5 positions rather than 3. Any sort of driver prompts or head-to-heads or team prompts, any of those areas that we might have missed that you're thinking about there, Wyatt?
I'll plug again the Truex top 3 from Caesars. That's just a crazy number. But for head-to-heads, I kind of looked. The craziest number I saw was like Bell is in a head-to-head with like Chase Elliott, and Chase was like pretty much a plus 200 on FanDuel. I was like, what the heck? Because everything else is just even. And I'll look on DraftKings real quick. It's I don't know, man. I do like to. There's only 2 on DraftKings right now, but like Blaney versus Logano, like I'm taking. Oh, Logano's a plus 105. Yeah, I'm taking that. That's an easy one. And Larson versus Hamlin is dead even. I don't know. It just depends on practice qualifying. Yeah, I take the Logano one. That's pretty easy. Plus 105 hit.
Yeah, I think Blaney will be fast, but I definitely it's. Right now,
not faster than Logano.
Yeah, I'm all on Logano for this one. I think Blaney's shot was WWT. He had it and then was one lap short. I think he'll be a top 5 car. I really believe he'll be a top 5 car at Iowa. But if I'm picking between the 2, it's Logano. So to have Logano at plus money there in that matchup, definitely agree with. And sticking with the Fords too, for a top Ford, I do like Josh Berry at plus 1,200. Now, like I just mentioned, though, keep in mind Blaney, Logano, and Brad are also in that mix because they are Fords. So I do like those 3 drivers over Berry, but to have that plus 1,200 number compared to a plus 250 for the 2 Team Penske guys to finish as the top Fords, maybe get a little bit of value there. That could be a sprinkle for me, but probably. That's the only driver in that market that I would hit on, because for Toyotas, like Bell is plus 160. I don't want to bet on anyone else in that area for the Toyotas. And same thing with the Chevys, whether it's Larson, Byron, or Chastain. I just don't want to pick between any of those guys guys between those manufacturers there.
The 2 I like for that market, I do like Bell plus 160. Just because I've shopped a couple of the markets. DraftKings is the best at 160. Because I think other markets is like plus 130. I was like, oh, okay, I'll take that. And then Truex again. If you want to go big on him, I like the plus 500 number, but it's just a matter of beating Hamlin and Bell is the biggest risk. And he could be the top Toyota and still lose. And I'm okay with that because I'm winning anyway. It's just a matter of if Bell and Hamlin either have a problem or something like that. That's what you're betting on, because I think Bell for sure is going to have a better, just with how strong he's shown to be at Iowa. It's going to be tough to beat. Hamlin, you could beat. Who knows with Hamlin? That's a question mark. And Truex again probably could have won at Richmond, and you could bet plus 500 for him to beat those two drivers. That's a safe bet in my eyes.
Yeah, I like that value too, like you mentioned there. Well, we covered a lot, but we still have a couple more things to go in our favorite plays, the final segment. This is where we can give you, our favorite picks from everything that we've talked about, but also there's some things that we have left unsaid. Could be in the Xfinity market. Wyatt, what do you got from us there, if you have anything at all? I don't want to spoil.
Oh, no. I've been waiting since we've started talking before the show to throw this one out. I would throw the house on Brett Moffitt with Joe Gibbs Racing going into Iowa. He is a 2 wins with I believe with a Tory in the Truck Series, and he's like an Iowa machine. His number right now plus 1,400 to win outright, and he's driving a Joe Gibbs Racing car. Let's be fair, he's going to compete. Top 3 is a plus 400. Top 5 is a plus 180. I'm hitting all 3 numbers. I am putting everything to see Brett Moffitt at least do solid enough for a top 3 finish. And if he gets the win, that's even better. It'd be incredible to see. And then another one I got is Corey Heim plus 500 for a top 5. Remember, I'm drawing a lot of comparisons to Richmond, and he's just one of those guys where he's one of the transcendent talents that is coming up from the Truck Series. And just a reminder, Sam Hunt Racing is really damn good on Richmond. I was not that far fetched away from that track, so I could see that team really dominating and doing really well to where they can nab another 4th or 5th place finish. They could get a top 8. I think it's an 1,100 right now on DraftKings, but that the plus 5 for a top 5 is, I'm hammering that. I am calling it my shot now. Brett Moffitt's going to be a contender to win on Saturday. Take it to the bank.
Take it to the bank. I like the value on him too, like you mentioned. I mean, plus 180 for top 5. Keep in mind, in a Joe Gibbs Racing car. So no matter who's
not AM.
Like I feel like that's where he will be racing within, like the speed will be top 5 regardless. And I think he's definitely a talented and capable guy looking for an opportunity like that. I could see him capitalizing. But one driver that stands out to me, if talking to Xfinity here, Ross Chastain, it will be in the mix.
In a DTM car? The only time he's competed for the I'm sorry to shoot you down here, but the last time Ross competed with DGM legitimately, I was at this race 2021 at Coda. And he had a rocket ship too, but they just had they had early transmission or some kind of mechanical problem because it's GGM racing. It's like a plus 3,500 is what it is.
Well,
Remind me the number.
I don't know if he'll win,
well,
but
what's the number on it? What's the number on it?
Yeah, so plus so he's 30 to 1 to win, plus 7 for a top 3, and plus 350 for a top 5. So that's fair. He won't really have the stuff to race his way into a win or even a top 5.
I think Corey Heim winning over him 4,000.
For sure. Corey Heim for sure. Well, I remember John Hunter Nemechek getting really close at Richmond. Didn't Ty Gibbs beat him out in like a photo finish there?
Yeah, I was at that race actually. I was at that race. Yeah, that was a good race.
But going back to Ross Chastain though. Okay, so maybe he doesn't have a good Saturday, but the reps that he will be getting from being in the Xfinity car, I mean, hey, he might have just vaulted himself into one of my favorite plays, and that is bringing it back to the Cup Series here, because Ross Chastain racing in Xfinity, I'm glad we talked about it, because For him to be plus 300 to get a top 5, I could see it happening on Sunday. On Sunday, because of the reps he'll be getting in the Xfinity Series, and just racing in that race. Yeah, he won't have the right stuff or the right equipment, or the cars are not comparable, but the racetrack is the same. What do you think about that?
I agree. No, like it's always good to get reps in the Xfinity race prior to and see a couple hundred laps in, and it does boost your potential to do well during the Sunday race, and that's proven well. Just look at Kyle Busch's career; he's done that. I mean, he's the king of that when he was doing it all the time, and you can only do it so much in these days. I think so. What 5 attempts per drive, like for every driver. That's full-time Cup. It's different for like sophomores and rookies and all that. But yeah, like getting that experience in the Xfinity Series prior to it is very important, especially at a place that Cup's never been to, and that we haven't been to in general for NASCAR since 2019, I believe, or 2020, one of the two. But yeah, that'll be important to get, whether it's with TGM or whoever. He's not winning. I thought you were gonna go with a win. I was like, well, hold on now.
So to wrap us up here, I'll say my favorite play out of everything we've talked about, or maybe favorite value, would be Joey Logano on Sunday for the Cup Series. That would be to win it, just based off that plus 850 number right now. I've been in the similar mindset with Truex, and obviously he hasn't come through, but in terms of the value, because plus 850, I could see him, like you said, winning the pole, starting inside the top 3, and with that number being as high as it is, could probably be cut, maybe a 6-1, 7-1 after practice and qualifying there. For a top 5 as well, plus 110. I think Joey Logano himself is my favorite play, no matter what the type of market you will be betting on him this weekend. But Wyatt, what about you? Out of everything we've talked about in this episode, and we've covered a lot, so thank you, because you've been killing it this episode, and it's been great to be back with you, buddy. What do you got? One favorite final play for the people out there?
I always love coming in here. Thanks again, Tino. But it's I have to say the same thing. I'm gonna plug again. Logano's a plus 1100 on Bet Rivers, and that's too good to be true. That's insane. It's right behind it is again that Larson plus 650 boosted from Caesars is also to die for. But just for the value alone, like most of my money is probably gonna go on Joey Logano being that repaved king and getting the win at Iowa, and coming back to Iowa being a new track. Can you bet what else can you bet with most of your money other than what we've talked about with tire testing and all that, which again is Kyle Larson as well. But again, it's just Logano being that guy on new tracks and repaved tracks is just too much to stray away from. Plus 1100, it's a insano number on Bet Rivers again. Plus 850 is great too on DraftKings.
Hey,
love you, DraftKings. Love you, DraftKings.
No, well,
that's a range though, right?
Yeah,
that's 350. Yeah. That is 350 range. That's insane. Like just between all sports books, but
and I was happy with the plus 850. I was, but the 11-1.
Bet Rivers
there, yeah.
Bet Rivers is on some. You know what? Sometimes, man, I was like, man, I don't know.
And that
capitalize on it.
I love the books that are on though. You know what? Because then we get to capitalize with the knowledge that we have. So that's a great point there. Joey Logano's the guy. Brett Moffitt too in the Xfinity side, and some of the other guys that we've mentioned. But Wyatt, mention to the crowd where they can follow you at. Anything that you have coming up with Front Stretch or some of your own socials that maybe you'll be putting out there, and any of the racing content that we could see you on, because you are the man. I want people to follow you, and stay tuned to what you got going on.
Well, you can follow me at Wyatt Game Time on Twitter, or on X. They finally changed the handle on that thing. But I might be going to a IndyCar race, pending where it's going to be. I'm hoping to get out there and cover some IndyCar while I wait to go to Kansas Speedway. That's my next stop in the playoffs a while from now. So I'm very excited to be back out there at the track in the fall. But You might catch me at an IndyCar race. Might catch me. That is still pending. I will let y'all know on my socials. Wyatt _game time_ Watson on Instagram as well. So be sure to catch the action here from Iowa, man. I'm super even though they butchered the track and made it a Frankenstein. I am so excited that NASCAR racing is coming back to the Hawkeye State. And hey, by the way, shout out Corey LaJoy for that Hawkeye paint scheme. That's gonna look so damn good on the track. And let's have fun. Let's win, guys. Let's win.
Thanks so much again to Wyatt for coming on the program. Really enjoyed that episode. And I'll be honest, guys, I felt prepared to talk about Iowa, but I didn't really feel prepared to bet on Iowa until the show. And I hope you all felt that way too. Let me know in the comments below who you're thinking can win in Iowa in the Cup Cars for the first time. Really excited for this race. Hopefully the track and the racing action is as great as I am excited to see this happen and see it all unfold. Either way, when we have a NASCAR race on Sunday, it's always a great day and a great weekend for me because I love the sport so much and I'm so happy I can cover it for you guys here on Through the Gears. And with that being said, gotta shout out Wyatt again. You can follow him at Wyatt Game Time. Be sure to do so you can stick around there and see everything he's working on for Front Stretch. And speaking of Front Stretch, be sure to follow their podcast platforms and every podcast they got coming out this weekend and during the weeks as well, but especially the Stock Car Scoop, which comes out after every race that really breaks down everything you need to know from behind the scenes, as our team will be there covering it, and also everything that you might have seen on TV as well. So be sure to do that. Be sure to like this video, comment as I mentioned already, subscribe if you're not there as well, and you can find me for more NASCAR betting analysis and content at Tino, PATTIGNO, and I'm looking forward to this weekend's race, and we'll talk about it all when I see you guys next week as we go through the gears.